It's no secret many salespeople dread participating in RFPs. They feel unfair, unclear, inefficient, and otherwise difficult. However, with more business adopting RFPs as part of the decision-making process in their efforts to quote-unquote equal or level the playing field, it's crucial that sales professionals know how to approach them. In this episode of Breaking Sales, Pam and I discuss the mindset that you'll need to disrupt them. Is it really about the integrity of the process, or is it really about the integrity of the decision that the prospect ends up making? I think it's time to fight back. I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Pam, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
What's the travel been like? Tell me where you've been for the past 2-3 weeks. Can you walk me through it?
All over the place. I've been to Charlotte. I've been to Chicago. I've been to Texas. I've been to the Northeast. A little bit of everything, as usual. It's all been good.
That's amazing.
Really good.
You got your rhythm? You got your rhythm in each city?
I live in each city. I have my hotels in each city. I have my mini families in every city. The great thing about traveling frequently and going to the same places is people get to know you very, very well. And they are like my little families all over the different cities, which is a lot of fun. Everybody knows my name. It's a lot of fun. And I like that.
I remember when I traveled a lot too, it was almost like the same hotels always felt comforting. You got to know some of the staff, which could be also cool and sad at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's true. That could be true.
When you get to know the people who clean the rooms, then you know there's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. But I like it because they leave me extra chocolate because they know how much I like it. So it's not so bad.
So what do you want to talk about today? We've been talking a lot about the different things that we see from a coaching standpoint, these different challenges our clients are having as they're trying to grow their business and bring on new clients and build new relationships. What are some of the trends right now that you're seeing?
So today I want to talk about high intent conversations. We talk about the difference between low intent, it's all about me, high intent, it's all about our prospect. If our sales professionals, our clients really want to master the art of a high intent conversation, it's hard. It's a very hard thing to do because I do have a vested interest as the sales professional in the prospect's decision. And so asking questions to help them determine whether or not a change makes sense and asking them questions about whether or not their process is going to help them arrive at the right decision is very, very difficult. And you know me, Dan, I believe you can turn any low intent question into a high intent question, but it takes extreme practice. It takes a lot of work on understanding what your role really is in this dynamic. And you have to believe that. And I think as of late, I'm really seeing the difference between people that view high intent as a tactic versus people that view high intent as something that it really does shape the way I think about my role. So I want to talk a little bit about RFPs. We have a lot of clients who ascertain business through the process of an RFP. And I guarantee you our listeners know what RFP stands for. It's that request for proposal. So it's when an organization decides they may need a change and they run a formal process, and it's called an RFP. And so as of late, RFPs definitely are picking up. And I think our natural instinct as a sales professional is to tell ourselves, well, I'm not going to participate in those because they're never fair. It's hard to get information. You don't necessarily get an audience with the decision makers. And lately, if you decide not to participate in RFPs, you may not be able to grow your business the way you need to because it's getting more and more popular.
So what drives me nuts about the RFP piece, Pam, is when the decision makers say, you're only going to get 45 minutes, right? It's a 30, 40, 50 page long RFP. right? And we're not going to allow you to talk or ask us any more questions than what everybody else has asked. And if you ask the questions, we're going to distribute it to everybody else who's participating in the RFP, whatever the answers are. And we're not going to disrupt. This is my favorite one, Pam. We're not going to disrupt the integrity of the process. I want to say to that decision maker, okay, so what you're telling me is you have a process that you want to hold to, but what if the process doesn't help you make the best decision? What's more important, the integrity of your process or the integrity of where you end up in your final decision? It drives me bonkers. It's like, really? That's what you're focused on? The integrity piece of the process? Because people want to ask you questions? For me, and you know how I am, I'd be like, I'm out, gone, see ya, I'm not participating.
I know. But you also know that it is reality. It's reality that I'm not going to get an audience with all the decision makers. And that's okay as long as I have the ability to understand their perspective. So if at least the person that I'm communicating with, the person who is running the show, I need to be able to say, I understand if I'm not going to get to talk to John and Jane and Jimmy and Julie. However, I need to understand their perspective. So whatever way we get that, I'm good with if I can't spend individual time with those folks. Because we get the reality of that there's a lot of folks that, you know what, no, I'm not going to be able to entertain a conversation with you. But at least I can make sure of my contact. I'm asking all the questions that I know they're going to have to think through in order to arrive at the appropriate decision. So here's what we're hearing a lot lately. And listeners, I agree with your statement when you say to me, Pam, number one, I don't know whether or not that feels appropriate for me to ask certain questions. And Pam, number two, I don't know that they're going to answer it. And I agree. These types of questions that we're coaching, these high intent questions to help these folks get it right, are difficult questions to ask. So someone on the opposite side of the table truly believes your intent is to help. And number two, you're right. You may not either A, get an answer, or B, get an answer that provides any clarity. But what we are finding, Dan, though, is our sales professionals who are really practicing the art of effective questioning from the lens of high intent are getting answers. And they are helping people make some different decisions or pivot within their process. And I've got a couple I want to share today because I think they're really good. So my first one, she practices the art of the conversation quite a bit by recording her conversations. She plays them back to herself and she listens to, okay, how do these questions sound? Do they sound more self-serving? Is my authenticity coming through that I truly am trying to help them get it right? So she gets a phone call that says, all right, we're going through an RFP process and we'd like to invite you as a potential vendor. And she says, okay. She does a really good job of framing the question around why are you doing an RFP? She frames the question and says, hey, Jane Doe, everybody embarks on a process like this for a lot of different reasons, and I certainly don't want to assume that I know yours. Can you give me the backstory of what led you here? Like just a really good question as opposed to, so how come you guys are doing an RFP? Okay, which can sound so low intent because, you know, a lot of sales professionals are trying to avoid the RFP.
Pam, that's a really good distinction there, where one is there's an authenticity and there's a conviction of, hey, I get you guys want to do an RFP. Could you share a little bit about some of the backstory of how you got to where you are, right? That's such a really nice way to ask versus, why are you guys doing the RFP?
Get a lot more truth asking it the first way. So the prospect goes into, we're extremely dissatisfied with the experience right now that we're having with our current partner, and goes through an 8-minute kind of verbalization of all the issues that they're having. So then she says, okay, Tell me a little bit about the process. Kind of walk me through how you see this playing out, who might be involved, all that kind of good stuff. And so he walks through, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do this, and then we're going to have a second phase, and it's going to look like this. And she said, okay, don't need to tell me names, because you know I'm a big fan of this, Dan. I'm a big fan of this. I don't need to understand who you're inviting to the party, but as an advisor, if I'm supposed to be helping you get it right, I do need to understand the relevance of who you invited to the party, including me. I don't want to make an assumption as to why I'm being included in this. So she did a really good job on that piece. She said, all right, don't need names. You don't need to share names, but can you tell me some of the reasons, the relevant reasons you're inviting who you're inviting? What's already kind of stuck out in terms of why you think these people might be a good fit moving forward for you? And the person said, well, because we've had some exposure to you through some of the things you've been doing, and we like what we see. Named another, had no problem saying the name, and then said, and then our current partner will be participating as well. And she did a really good job of saying, okay, can we hold there for just a second? She said, John Doe, you just spent a lot of time telling me the whole reason you're going through this process is because of the issues that you're having with your current partner. And now it sounds like you're also asking them to participate in this process. And here's what I like. I think as sales professionals, and I used to do this all the time because, you know, Dan, my old world was all RFPs with alcohol. We make massive assumptions. Well, of course, they're going to invite the current participant. Like, it's out of respect. It's out of, and I think that's a massive mistake to assume that. I do. I think in some cases that may be true. I would argue that that's not necessarily respectful if you plan on firing somebody to invite them to participate in the process. But I don't think that's the case all the time. And in this one, it wasn't. So she asked him, she just said, do you mind if I inquire? Because remember, my role, regardless of you hire me, is to understand the process and how we can potentially help you. Maybe you don't need to run an RFP here. Can you tell me more about that? And he said, well, that's interesting that you would frame it that way. As I just walked you through, there's 5 people making this decision. 2 of them don't agree that it's time to move on, which is why our current partner is participating. And she said, okay, so 2 out of the 5 of you don't agree that it's time to move on from your current partner. Nope. Okay, let's play this out a little bit. So you're going to have 3 come in, and let's make an assumption that they're not going to change their mind throughout this process. And the guy said, oh, they're not going to change their mind throughout this process. Okay, good acknowledgement. So let's fast forward. Regardless of who it is, the 3 of you do identify somebody you'd like to hire over your current partner. Let's play that out. How loud are the voices of the other 2? And he said, pretty darn loud. Okay, how convicted are they? They're pretty darn convicted. And she said, okay, it might be worth the 3 of you sitting down and figuring out how hard you want to fight this and whether or not this is a fight that's worth fighting. She got a call 2 weeks later. We're not going to do an RFP. We don't want to do the fight. They are very convicted in how they feel. So we're going to sit down with our partner and lay out kind of some components of what we want to see over the next couple of years to make us all okay with continuing in this relationship. And I just thought that was an outstanding example of learning how to have a hard conversation that's rooted in high intent and helping people figure out. And she will be the first to tell you, these answers didn't come easy to him. He had to sit back and think, okay, here's kind of why we're doing this. And to the point too, where he even admitted to her, I guess maybe the 3 of us were kind of hoping hearing from 2 others may make a difference, but her continuing to prompt that came to the conclusions they're not going to change their mind. we're fooling ourselves. They're very convicted in who our current partner is. It's not, sitting with two other firms is not going to change that. So, and I understand that's extremely hard to do, but she got a very nice kudos from the organization around, you saved us a lot of time, you saved us a lot of energy, and you forced us internally to figure out how we could make this work. And I think that's exactly what our role should be.
I agree. I'm going to play devil's advocate. I want you to coach me here.
You got it.
I want to be very clear. I agree with you, and that was handled very, very well. Very well. And that's all mindset for our listeners. You can't do what Pam just articulated if you're attached to the outcome. You're just going to go along with it and tell yourself a story that you got a chance. You can't do what Pam said if you're scarce or low intent. It's just not going to happen. But let me be devil's advocate. Pam, I agree with what you're saying, but this is a really good opportunity. I mean, they're right in our sweet spot. I know we can help them. I know who they're working with, and I know who they're working with hasn't been on the ball lately. So I feel like I want to participate in this RFP.
I understand that is the reaction of most of us, me being included at one point in my life. If I can just get in front of them, I just feel like I know we can demonstrate how we're better. But Dan, we both know our perception of anything doesn't matter. What we perceive as better, they may not perceive as better. What we think we could do differently, they may not care about. So at the end of the day, and in this one too, the bias piece, I think is important for all our listeners to remember.
Yeah.
You have 5 decision makers that we know are not unbiased. We had 3 of them that were already biased, that they wanted something new. We had 2 of them that were coming in with a bias that they didn't want anything new. So this has nothing to do with how we feel about the deal and everything to do with how are they going to determine whether or not they need to actually make a change. And it's very different. We're not selling our company. We're helping them determine, do you need a change? Can you make a change? Both of those things are very, very different than our perception on the opportunity.
And we're putting ourselves in a position where we can decide, is this worth my time or not? Objectively, right? So as the sales professional here, right, taking the approach that you help this person through, you're actually able to become more objective on your own too. So you're not throwing energy and time and effort towards something that's going to be a struggle, and you're going to end up chasing it. You're going to end up agitated, frustrated, and eventually disappointed and annoyed. And you're creating that whole experience because you weren't being objective. So yeah, that is fantastic. And you nailed it on the biases. You know, loyalty biased is an incredibly strong bias. And we all know that it is human nature to overestimate what we currently have and who we do it with, whether it works or not, and underestimate what we could gain by doing something different. That's just human nature.
And Dan, you know, during COVID, I took 700 master classes on psychology. Like, that was my thing. And one of the things that really stood out to me when I was going through all those courses was, if I'm not ready as a human, if my bias, like, I'm not ready, I haven't told you, here's why I'd be open to considering something else or someone else. There is nothing I can do as a sales professional to get you ready. And I think a lot of times we go into situations like this and we say, once they see X, once they see Y, once they meet John Doe, once they meet Jane Doe, that will change. And during all those courses, one of the major predominant themes was, if me, as the person who holds this bias, isn't ready, there is little to nothing you can do to get me ready. I have to open that door first. Okay? You're not going to wedge anything. I have to open the door first. And that's the other piece, I think, from these high intent conversations. You have to be okay. You have to be okay with how they view things. You're not going to convince me of something that I'm not ready to be convinced of. I have to be at least somewhat ready for it.
Let's back up as we kind of come to a conclusion here on this one, right? Number one, you have to have conviction as an individual. And the only way to have conviction is to know that you're doing the right thing. That's where conviction comes from. We know that you have to have a mindset that says, this is not an opportunity yet. This is not about me winning. This is about me understanding, why do they think they need to do this? What do they gain? What do they risk in the process? Is this really a process they should go through? And is this a process I want to participate in? And that is at its core, the idea of detachment and abundance and benevolence coming together. I can't emphasize, though, the conviction piece. You have it. This person had to have it. But conviction is when we truly believe that we are doing the right thing and we allow ourselves to do the right thing. It's hard to have conviction when we are doing something that just benefits us or doing something that may not benefit others.
And I think the one thing I would tell our listeners, you have to really practice the ability to communicate your high intent conviction. Because again, I know when you ask these questions of a prospect, it's very difficult. They know you want to win the deal. They know what you think about being invited. So you really do have to practice. You have to practice the ability to say, I've got a set of questions that have nothing to do with us, and they have everything to do with you. And here's why I think it's important that I ask you these questions. Here's why I want to make sure it makes sense for us to be involved. It's very different, and it's so hard to explain until you're in a room and you feel and experience the difference between low intent and high intent. And listen, listeners, I used to do this all the time. Well, I need to make sure this is worth my and my team's time. That is as low intent as you can get. And guess what? If that's how you're going to phrase these questions, you're going to hear what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. And I know it's tough, but we got to make that shift from low intent to high intent. That's hard.
Yeah, it's funny. We, as you know, Pam, we do more and more work in the management consulting space, which is fun. It's very interesting, very engaging. But I also know there's so many times where someone says, are you kidding? It's an opportunity, and we're going to go for it, and we're going to present well, and we're going to show value and create value, and right, we're going to get our messaging succinct. And it's like, you don't understand the psychology of how human beings make decisions. There isn't a single human being on the face of this planet, and if I could throw an F-bomb in there right now, I would, but I won't. But there's not a single F-bomb human being on the face of this planet that makes a decision, okay, based on somebody else's needs, somebody else's value or expertise, until they internalize the risk and gain that they take or they experience from the expertise. It has to be internalized, to your point. So all of you out there can sing the song and do the dance and convince yourself that value in messaging is how you do it and your resources are great. You are absolutely lying to yourself, and you are blind. It's not how it works. Pam, I got to be absolute in that. We've studied this, and I don't know how many years we have invested in this and studied it, and it just doesn't work that way.
That's why these concepts we coach are so hard to master, to truly master and do it right. It's hard.
It's a new swing. I know there's some people who follow golf and some don't care, and I don't blame them. But in essence, it's this new swing. You know, doing it through messaging and valuing and trying to bank on your resources and the dog and pony show, that's a swing that you might hit the ball straight every now and then. So then you convince yourself that's the swing that works. And then you don't think about all the times you duff it, you slice it, you hook it, whatever, right? The swing you're talking about is a different swing, and it starts with the mindset, which is consistency. Why should they do this? I'm an advisor. Let me figure out with them, is this in their best interest? Is this going to really serve where they're going? Is this going to serve what they're trying to accomplish? Is this right for them? Let's focus on that first. Then we'll figure out if we should be included or not. Thanks for listening to Breaking Sales. If you want to get engaged with us outside of the podcast, be sure to go to our website, lappin180.com, go to contact us. You can also engage with us on LinkedIn at Dan Lappin or Lappin180.